Hey everybody, welcome into the third video in our series on how to use the orders to create some amazing lines in your improvisation. So, public service announcement, if you haven't checked out the first two videos in this series, I'm going to put them up here. I'll also link to them in the description. It'd probably be smart to go and watch those other videos before you watch this one, because we've been getting progressively more advanced and introducing some new ideas, but they all go back to that original video on how to practice through these orders and make all this stuff possible. So we talked about the different orders: half steps, whole steps, minor thirds, major thirds, fourths, and tritones. Then in the last video, we talked about the concept of sequencing, which is taking one of those orders and taking a specific line and moving it through those orders. And that results in some really, really cool sounds. But today we're going to talk about kind of my favorite way to utilize this that I think results in the maximum amount of creativity. And honestly, with this concept that I'm about to explain to you, you could practice for the rest of your life and never run out of new ideas through tweaking and thinking and building off of the skills that you've built for yourself. But more about that later. Let's dive into the actual idea. So again, we're going to use the B-flat concert blues, and let's go into the couple of orders that we're using and where. All right, so if you look at measure 3 and measure 4, you'll notice that there's some pretty wacky chords there. So the first thing I want you to do is look at the downbeat of measure 3. We've got an F sharp concert chord symbol there. Then if we move down to F, then if we move down to E, and then finally in bar 5, E flat, what we realize is we're using the order of half steps to get into that first cadence point. Now let's jump all the way down to measure 9, and you will notice that we start with E flat, then we go to D flat, then we go to B. So we're using whole steps, aren't we? Now, one weird thing happens with the whole steps. You'll notice that at the end of measure 10 going into measure 11, I'm using a half step. And that is simply because I love the sound of a chord or key a half step up from the target chord. I love the way that that resolves down a half step. So while the chord progression, the superimposed chord progression that we're using is based off of whole steps, you will notice that I'm resolving it via half step. And that's totally something you can do. That right there might be a new thought for you. The resolution doesn't always have to go with the order that we're thinking of. Okay, so this is a very basic concept that I can explain to you really, really fast, but again, is going to be something you could work on for months, years, a lifetime, and still not get to the end of it. So what we're doing is, with each one of those chord symbols, we're going to use just a pure, for now, major triad. And where this differs from the sequencing is that we can play whatever we want to with that triad. Why are triads so cool? Well, the thing about a triad is it's the quickest and easiest and clearest way to outline a tonality. So if I play F sharp, A sharp, C sharp, your ear is going to go, he's playing in the key of F sharp major. No doubt about it. So the concept is extremely simple. I'm going to play an F sharp triad, nothing else, for an entire bar in bar 3. Then I'm going to switch to an F major triad for 2 beats, and then an E major triad for 2 beats, and then I'm going to land it in the key of E flat. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing in measure 9. I'm going to play an E flat triad for an entire bar, then a D flat triad for 2 beats, then a B triad for 2 beats, then I'm going to land that over a B flat 7 chord. But here's the thing that differs from the last video. In the last video, we were literally taking one idea and we were repeating it verbatim in a whole bunch of different keys. Now, we're not doing that anymore. The only rules here are that I'm only playing the notes from the triad. That's it. The idea can be totally different. It can move in a different direction. I can use a different rhythm. I can play all the notes of the triad. I can play a partial triad. All of that is in my control. The only thing I'm prescribing is that I'm going to use those triads in some way. So let's check out what this particular layout of triads sounds like. I'll play a couple choruses, and I'm just going to be trying to be creative while using those superimposed triads through a half step order going into bar 4 and a whole step order going into bar 11. Let's check it out. sounds pretty cool. I like it a lot. I could practice that for hours and still be coming up with new sounds because I'm so much more free when all I'm thinking about is the triad and not a line that is sequenced. Now, do you also see how this moves beyond the basic idea of a triad pair, which is taking two triads and switching back and forth between them? Oh, really cool sound. I use them all the time, but this is a way to really go beyond just a pair of triads and use triads in a different way. Sometimes a lot of my students, they struggle to get beyond, what can I do that's beyond just playing two triads together? It might be hitting the limit of that kind of sound or whatever. This is a great way to still utilize triads and how powerful they are without just limiting it to two. Okay, let's dive into another example. So all we're doing with this, we're keeping our same orders, but now instead of playing one triad for an entire bar in bar 3, we're gonna include one more triad. So now I'm playing G, F sharp, F, E, and landing on E flat. This will give a completely different effect because I'm moving through the triads more quickly. And then I'm doing the same thing in bar 9, but with the whole step. So now I go F, E flat, D flat, B, then down a half step for the resolution to B flat. Now, again, I'm only using major triads, but what you'll notice is that this comes across completely differently than the last one, because remember, I'm free to do whatever I want. And plus that extra triad being in there is going to completely change the complexion of what I play, how I play it, how much space I fill up, how much space I leave empty. So you'll notice that even though I'm only adding one thing, this one will sound completely different. Let's check it out. That one's super nice too, right? And it's not better or worse than the first one. It's just a different sound. So there is no like, oh, when the triads are packed in more tightly, they sound better. Well, you might come to that conclusion, but I might come to a completely different conclusion. I'm simply trying a whole bunch of things so that when I'm improvising, I have command over a variety of different sounds. Okay, let's jump into one more example. And this is something that you may not have thought of. So in this example, what do you notice right off the bat? It's the same orders. Look at bar 3, G, F sharp, F, E, and then resolving to E flat. But look at the quality of the triads. Now I'm not just playing major triads. I'm playing a major triad followed by a minor triad, followed by another major triad, followed by an augmented triad before I resolve. And then if we look down at bar 9, I'm doing the same thing, but with different qualities of triads. So I'm starting with F minor, then I'm going to E flat diminished, then C sharp minor, then B major, then I'm resolving. So now think about the possibilities if you are not reserved to just one quality of triad. Think about keeping the order, but just changing the quality of the triads and how many possibilities that results in. And what you're going to notice is when you hear this one, it takes on a completely different complexion just by changing the quality of those triads. So let's check out what a couple of choruses over the blues with these triads sounds like. Sounds pretty awesome, doesn't it? And if I went through and I tweaked the different qualities and I could come up with a dozen different iterations of that and just be getting started. Now, should you do that right off the bat? Probably not. You should probably just stick with one quality of triad and wrap your mind around this concept. What is going to happen is as you work on this, you're going to come up with your own conception of it. And at the end of the day, the way that you ultimately use these might be completely different than the way that I use them. But this is just meant to be a look at the possibilities of what we can do with this stuff. And I think you'd agree with me, the possibilities are very exciting. We only dealt with 2 different orders. So imagine if you flush this out to all the different orders. You did them ascending, descending. You did half-step resolution points, whole-step resolution points, maybe some resolution point that I haven't even thought of. And you could put this in more places in the blues than I did here, not to mention using it over other jazz standards with other chord progressions. Now, a couple things before I let you go. One thing that this requires is a deep knowledge and flexibility with triads. So practicing your triads through these orders, manipulating triads in a whole bunch of different ways. Can you start on the root? Can you start on the third? Can you start on the fifth? Can you play them up? Can you play them down? Can you play them in groupings of 3? Can you play them in groupings of 4? Can you play 2 directions at once? Go up, then down. If you haven't worked on your triads and investigated your triads in a whole bunch of different ways, you're just not going to have very much facility with the sounds you need to pull something like this off. So if this is something where you're like, this is it for me, this is the sound I've been looking for, you're probably going to have to work on this in tandem with studying triads in every way you possibly can. I've done a lot of that work in my life with the intention of being able to do some stuff like this. So realize, as always with music, there's some other work that needs to be done. And sometimes the lesson and putting the lesson into action has to be delayed a little bit while you gather the skills to actually pull this stuff off. But I hope that this opens up some new possibilities to you. You see, practicing in these different orders, the half step, whole step, minor third, major third, fourth, tritone, it's all opening the door to sounds like this. Triads are one of my favorite methods to be as creative as possible while using a pretty simple device. But if you think about all the different things that you could do with this, and maybe we'll investigate some more in this series, you're going to realize that you could work on this forever. And don't let that intimidate you. Let that excite you. There's no end to this. There's always more possibilities. All right, let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you so much for watching this video, and we'll see you on another one soon. Bye, everybody.